Shut up and sit down.
Ryan, two movies this week, one in theaters and one on Apple TV Plus. Big release, long delayed for theaters. Kenneth Branagh's follow-up to Murder on the Orient Express. We have Death on the Nile. Lot of reasons for the delay. COVID, reshoots. Armie Hammer may or may not be a cannibal, I guess. I try not to follow that kind of story. I see headlines like that and I'm just like, I'm out. Call me when you have footage or pics or it didn't happen.
Unfortunately, there are pics of the text.
You know what? People write crazy shit. That is all I'm saying. People write crazy shit. I didn't even read them. I don't want to read them. Again, people write crazy shit, especially when he's probably drunk or high. Who knows? Because he's an actor. Aren't they always drunk and high?
Well, he comes from a wealthy family as well, so
so there you go. He has affluenza. Regardless, we have to talk about this sequel again, directed by Kenneth Branagh. 20th Century Studios now instead of 20th Century Fox like the original, thanks to Disney's buyout. Another star-studded cast in an adaptation of Agatha Christie. Tom Bateman is back as Book, whom I love, by the way. But Annette Bening, Kenneth Branagh, of course, as Hercule Poirot, Russell Brand, pick 100 freaking crazy people, including Armie Hammer. So Gal Gadot. You can't.
Are you comparing Gal Gadot to Armie Hammer?
No, I'm just scrolling down the list. It's insane. From Game of Thrones, Rose. Yeah.
Yes.
Amazing cast. Again, an amazing cast put together for this. A little different feel this time around, though. The Murder on the Orient Express. We start with he's solving a mystery, and then he goes to get on the train, and then Johnny Depp is killed in his sleep, and he's off and running. In this one, he's looking at the sunrise over the pyramids of Giza, and runs into. Well, no, it actually opens. He's in a nightclub in Paris.
There you go.
Where he's watching, it's 1937, I believe, is when this set. And it's, he's watching a nightclub act and a lot of dancing and a lot of, 37's hipster, 37 hipsters. It's crazy. It's very not Poirot. Let's put it that way. He doesn't look like he's comfortable there at all. But then we go forward 6 weeks and he's in Egypt and he runs into Book by happenstance, it would seem.
But you've forgotten his the very begining.
Oh my goodness, yes. How could I forget that? Let's the framing mechanism on this is wonderful, by the way. Let's do it. I don't want to spoil anything.
All right. Well, you go back to a much earlier time.
World War I, 1914.
Yeah.
In the trenches where we see his innate brilliance and deductive reasoning on display in a trench.
Yes.
And we see the origin of his mustache.
Yes.
It
has its own origin story.
It has its own origin story. We see into his pre-detective Poirot days. Kind of how he becomes Detective Poirot. Yeah. And the symbolism of the mustache is both the beginning and the end. It is the alpha and the omega of the film. And I'll leave that at that. But yes, the symbolism of the mustache is actually kind of cool at both ends of this film. But again, yeah, it's a different feel. Somehow he winds up getting invited to accompany this wedding party of Gal Gadot and Armie Hammer. She's rich, he's not. They get married, and it's this kind of like traveling honeymoon party. The weirdest traveling honeymoon party ever. It's got like her ex-boyfriend come fiance. They're being stalked by her friend who was Armie Hammer's fiance until he met Gal Gadot. We have her godmother, Book's mom, her cousin, air quotes, who keeps the books. It is quite an eclectic bunch. Let's put it that way for a honeymoon trip across the world, and they wind up in Egypt. And then
they wind up on a boat.
They wind up on a boat traveling up the river to look at all the really cool stuff that's in Egypt. And there's an attempted murder, or is it an accident? And then there's a shooting and a murder and a murder and a murder and a murder. And once the bodies start falling, they start racking up.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
There's no shortage of. I mean, there's one dead body in Orient Express. They are stacking up like cordwood by the time this movie's over. And he, of course, has to solve it. And nobody in this film and in this group is what they seem. Without exception, nobody in this film is where they are or who they are as they seem. Every single person, and I mean that literally. Nobody is who they seem or why they are. It's got like I said, it's got a different feel to it. It feels very old Hollywood, doesn't it?
Sure.
Much more so than Orient Express. That was very contained. This one's really wide, but it's got a lot of like long tracking shots.
Yeah.
It's very brightly lit. It feels like at any moment they're going to break into a musical number. Even though, I mean, there's a couple musical numbers, but it's someone performing. But this feels almost like at any point we could be busting into Rodgers and Hammerstein, full-blown musical. How did you? I don't remember how you were on with Orient Express. Were you?
I was fine. I mean, I mean, Agatha Christie. I mean, if I have a complaint, there's kind of a formula.
Sure.
And Poirot, those tend to be the most formulaic in that there's a lot of chaos, and at the end he puts a bow on everything.
Right.
But I mean, I think I read Death on the Nile in like 8th grade, 7th grade.
Right.
So, I mean, I was aware of the story, although I had forgotten a lot of the details, probably all of them, to be honest. But, yeah, I mean, I'm fine. I mean, they it's kind of like a Sherlock Holmes movie. Right. They kind of most of them, although they've been reinvented a little bit but if you do it, in the way that it was intended, they all kind of I don't want to say blurred together, but there's a way that they're done.
Right.
I guess there's a style, and yeah, I mean, I didn't feel like this was all that different, but tone wise, but I think you're right. I think it is shot differently, but I think it also because there's more to shoot. They're not just on a train, they're on a boat, they're going to these luxurious places that, quite frankly, it's hard to believe that they ever existed. Not that that they existed. It's and I'm sure they did. I mean, there's a world that the wealthy see that the majority of us never really get to partake in.
Right.
And that's what this movie kind of is. It's just a wild idea that I think, but it probably happens with rich people where they do get married and they go on 3-week extended honeymoon journey with friends and family. I don't know, maybe, but but yes, you're right. The cinematography in this one was more obvious, and not in a bad way. There were some really great tracking shots. There was, just some nice aerial shots. Very pretty movie in general. Costumes were very pretty. The nightclub scene, obviously, where you have some pretty elaborate dresses and things, and so I mean, I think I mean, I don't think that people were going to be like, oh, this movie's radically different, but it is fundamentally different. I think the color they use are different. It's just but at the same time, it's still very familiar.
Because it's, I mean, again, it's Agatha Christie, so you're right. That people are going to die. Clues will be found that you can interpret multiple ways, and you just need enough of them, put them together, or just Hercule Poirot.
Everything will happen just off frame in the movies,
right?
Where you're just blocked. You almost saw.
Yeah, and that leads me to my next observation is that, again, I read a lot of Agatha Christie when I was a kid because it was in the house, but I don't remember. I remember the titles and vague premises, and that's pretty much it, right?
See, I remember the cover of this, and that's of this one, and that's how I know that I read it. I remember holding it's the cover.
So I'm fairly certain most of mine, if they had dust jackets, were gone, so I probably didn't really have covers. But I want to say, a lot of things, you're right, happen just off screen, just out of frame, just behind that door. And I was very proud of myself that I was kind of right by the time the movie was at the end, and kind of wrong. Well, so I was very proud of myself that I had come to a lot of correct conclusions, but not all of the correct conclusions. That, and those make a difference.
Well, and that's probably where they want you to be, because if it's all so far out there that you couldn't guess any of it,
right?
They almost have to cheat to get to that.
Right. Well, and then there's always red herrings.
Yeah.
So you always try to figure out what's the red herring, and if you throw that away, well, sometimes if you throw that away, that's not the red herring. So that's half the fun as well, is figuring out what actually matters and what doesn't. So some of that stuff I threw out. Some of it's like you discard early, and then you're like, well, in retrospect, in light of this, maybe I'll pull that back out of the trash.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that, and that's what makes these kind of movies fun. So that's great. Now, I think the performances overall were pretty good, but everything in this one, I almost feel like the characters are more over the top, and it might be because everyone is theoretically so incredibly wealthy and kind of aloof and independent, whereas in Orient Express that wasn't the case.
No, there's more of a class system. I mean, although to a certain extent there is a class system in this film. But
the bottom of that is like the top of Orient Express.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I mean, but there's no one who's not partaking in the luxury. They all have luxury, whereas Orient Express, you would have different classes and sort of, I mean, there literally is some separation in that regard. But no, I mean, they are all. No, I think you're right. I think there's the characters are a little bigger in this than before, but I think it's a bigger movie too, and I think it's a movie where we get to see the hero fail a little bit,
right?
Legitimately fail a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's always I like those stories, not because I want people to fail, but I think that the last thing you want with this kind of a story is to be with the guy who always gets it right.
Well, you don't want it to be too clean.
Yeah, you want.
And this
you want,
this one I think actually is figuratively speaking. It's dirtier than Orient Express was.
Yes. Well, there's more bodies, so that helps.
But also some of his decision makings and the results of his decision making and his deduction are dirty personally to him almost. So
and I like that it doesn't. It has this element of look, I'm good at what I do, but I'm not perfect.
Right. And it's terrible being right all the time.
Yeah.
And he's right enough of the time that it might as well be all the time. And there are times when I'm sure he hates it.
And I think there are reasons in this story for directions that the characters and things go that there's a reason why he's a little blind to some of the things, because there are there are people who, because a lot of these individuals know each other as well, and he knows a lot of the players, so you have sort of a preconceived notion about who these people are, and you have a hard time maybe changing the way that you look at somebody, which is not that unusual. I think, particularly if it's somebody you like or somebody you never liked, or, it's, you think of, we don't like to think that we're biased in that way, but we tend to be.
We have blind spots. Everyone, and even he does. And eventually he finds his way through them, but he doesn't necessarily like it when he does. So that kind of sucks for him in a lot of ways. So but yeah, to go back to this cast, I mean, Annette Bening, Rose Leslie, Letitia Wright. I mean, there's a lot of people in this. And like I said, overall, I think the performances are good, even though I was going to say there's a lot more melodrama, but I think that's a function of the class that we're talking about, the class and the period that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So everything feels a little more.
The manners.
Right.
Yes.
And so that I can kind of dismiss. But like I said, I think the interplay between the characters is good. You can figure out a lot of this before you get to the end, if you're a fan and you're paying attention. Like I said, I was happy with what I figured out and what I kind of figured out. So that was nice. It opens this week up against it'd still be against Jackass and Moonfall, which Jackass won, Moonfall did not, but Spider-Man is still in theaters. So I don't know what this film's gonna do with the delays. I want it to do well, obviously, because I waited for this. I was excited for this film since we knew it was coming. So I don't know what kind of reception it's actually going to get. I know people are already trashing it because 20th Century Studios actually deemed to release it, even though it has Armie Hammer in it. Well, you have to release it. You can't just throw it away. And
if you watch the film, I mean, as much as I don't, they may have edited him back a bit. I have no idea, but unfortunately, there's no way.
No, you can't cut him out
to without reshooting the entire film.
Right.
And considering that, so look, I mean, I was laughing to myself half the time because I'm sitting there, as he leans into someone, don't bite her. Yeah. Well, it's just I'm just, I guess, sick and demented. But no, I mean, it's hard. Would I have preferred him not in this film? Yes, but watching it, I could not figure out a way that you legitimately could take him out of this film and be able to get all those stars back into the room. And I mean, there's a lot of other factors, and I mean, they haven't promoted him in the advertising of it. In fact, they've really kind of pushed him into the background as much as they possibly could. I don't think you will see him working for Disney or anyone else all that soon. I think, I guess on principle, there's more people in this film than him.
Yes.
There are more people who made this film than him. There are people on this film who this is probably the biggest film they've ever made, and it's important that it gets out for that reason, if no other reason. There are there are just so many lives that are impacted if you just shelve this,
Right.
And so I mean, if you want to be upset with them, that's great. And and I don't disagree necessarily with. I mean, abuse is a serious topic, and he definitely should. If these things which he's purported to have said, and numerous women have said, then he shouldn't. But the unfortunate aspect of that is this was shot before that all came out.
Right.
And I wasn't aware of anything, I mean, for instance, with Kevin Spacey, we all kind of knew he was a jerk. We just didn't realize the extent to which that went. And I don't remember, I mean, I don't remember hearing much of anything about Armie Hammer. So it wasn't like when they hired him, they knew they had broken goods. It was after they had already shot this film that stuff came out, and there wasn't a quick switch in the same way that some other films were able to do. Basically, I mean, this was the budget on this one was insane, and and like I said, I did watch this film, looking at it, saying, could you realistically have not included him? And there's no chance. It's just the way the scenes are. I don't know how they would have done it. So I'm not giving them a pass necessarily, but I don't think it was Kenneth Branagh's fault. I don't think it was the studio's fault. I think he just had a guy who did stuff that they weren't aware of, and when it came to light, no one's defending him. I don't think I would see this as 20th century defending him by any stretch of the imagination. So, I think, in a perfect world, he gets CGI'd out and someone gets dropped in, but we can't all be Luke Skywalker.
No, we can't. We all can't. So Armie Hammer aside, how do you feel about this?
I'm fine with it. I like it. I think it's well done. I think it's engaging. I think it's entertaining. I also think it's formulaic, and I mean, it's all the things that you expect it to be, but done well.
Right. At a very high level.
Yeah. So I mean, yes. I mean, yeah. I honestly, if Armie Hammer hadn't been in this film, I would have liked it more.
Right.
There's no question about it. You put almost any other actor in there, and there are a lot of actors that could have replaced. He's really not even particularly that great in the role. I mean, he's fine. He's not bad, but I mean, There's nothing like, wow, I'll never see anyone play that role that way again. It's kind of like, well, plays it exactly like everyone else, would play it, which is maybe that's sad. But I mean, it's sad that you have an actor playing a part in a famous, something, and he's not very distinguishable. So but
part of that's probably part of that's the material.
Yeah, but there are other people in this film that you go, oh, who's that? Oh, look at or because there are some lesser known people and they hold their own.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely.
So I mean, so I'm mixed, I guess. I mean, but I'm not gonna. I can't let Armie Hammer ruin everything. Right. I mean, I get why you would be upset about it. I just think you have to look at the circumstances and be a little reasonable. I mean,
Right.
I guess you could argue that Disney's in a position where they could lose all that money and that they'd be fine. But again,
But you don't want to.
well,
Nobody
there's
wants to.
well, and there's a costumer on that, there's or someone who worked in the lighting department. I mean, there's people that if this film doesn't get released, it has a dramatic impact on their their careers.
Yes.
And it's none of their fault. So in a perfect world, but we don't live in one. And in a perfect world, Armie Hammer doesn't do crazy things and is faithful to his wife and whatever, but that's not the world we live in.
Yeah, that's true. So no, like I said, I enjoyed it well enough. Like I said, I loved the lush feel of the film.
Yeah,
I said the word I used is some of the visuals are just sumptuous.
Well, yeah, there's a very romantic sort of, which is maybe why it's being released. And when I romantic, I don't necessarily just mean like love and romance, but they're just kind of a longing for an era that may actually never have existed, if you want to be honest.
Right.
So I think it's a beautifully made film.
And then let's talk about it since we're there. Let's not forget that we end with the omega of the symbolism of the mustache.
Yeah.
And again, without explaining that, and like I said, that it's very symbolic. So it's interesting. So I guess now I'm wondering, is that symbolic of the film franchise? But I hope not. I hope we actually get another one, because I think they're fun. I think this is, I think if you can keep the budget manageable, I think this is something you could get 2 or 3 more films out of.
Yeah, and I would like to see them go off and do films or do stories that most of us aren't as familiar with. And I know that that's dangerous for them,
right?
But I would, and like I said, not that I remember what I read when I read them, but
right.
It does seem like there are a few Agatha Christie stories that get done over and over and over again, and there's got to be some that aren't
the lesser titles. Yeah, she wrote enough. She was not prolific.
Correct.
So there you go. Let's talk about a completely different kind of film that is also coming out this week, but it's coming out on Apple TV Plus.
Yeah, it's in theaters as well, but I don't know how many. A few.
Right. Okay, so it's going to be a mixed release. The Sky is Everywhere.
It is, yes.
I know, right? Based on a novel by Jan D. Nelson, who adapts it to a screenplay, directed by Josephine Decker, and really stars Grace Kaufman as Lenny as our star, who recently lost her sister and lives with her grandmother and her uncle because her mother is dead.
Correct.
And we learn where the father is or isn't as the film goes on.
Yep, we get there.
Which it's okay. You told me earlier today that you watched this, and I was like, well, let me just jump on there and knock this out. And you're like, and I'm like, I like her, I guess.
Well, I told you, I warned you that it was not necessarily a traditional coming of age teenager
correct.
Film.
There's a lot of angst. Teen angst. But this is not formulaic. Let's put it that way.
There are definitely parts. It follows the traditional structure to a certain extent, but the way that they navigate within that structure or it's not presented in the traditional way, for one thing.
No, it's okay. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the presentation. It's not a fantasy film.
No, but it's magic realism.
I was going to say there's an element of magical realism to it. There's some spots there's an element of surrealism to it. And that's before you just get to the interpersonal dynamics.
that's just the introduction,
right? And so and those become problematic in so many ways.
Well, here's how I would suggest. I think the film is told from Lenny's point of view.
Yes.
I think everything that happens is absolutely true in Lenny's point of view. So even the weird magical strangeness, I think the best way to look at this film is that all of that is happening. Because there's no reason. This is not a film where it's like, is she crazy? Right. This is more or less. This is welcome to the bizarre world, inner world of a teenager who has for years based her entire identity on and around her older sister.
Yes, they're both musicians.
They're both, and they're in a lot of ways. While she will tell you that her sister was the talented one, as an audience member, I think that we could all agree that no, you're both incredibly talented,
right?
But obviously, but she again, her whole life has been defined by I am the younger sister, and my sister is phenomenal, and everyone loves my sister. And she kind of doesn't notice that everyone actually really loves her as well. But that's not unusual.
No.
And so for me, this is a film about a lot of people trying to figure out who they are without being tied to someone else. So, or I'm no longer the sister of, I'm me.
Right.
Or I am no longer the boyfriend of, I have to figure out who I am without this person. Toby has to figure out, who was the boyfriend of the older sister, has to figure out what is his place in the world now. Because their relationship kind of solidified and had him defining things. And, so it's, I think it's a strange little film. I talked to the director today, and some of the cast as well, but I think that the most interesting thing was visually, she didn't want to make the film. She wanted to make it feel like it could be made by, these exceptional teenagers. And let's face it, this movie's filled with really exceptional teenagers. This isn't, the people in this are cream of the crop artists. And whatnot. So there's, I think, and I think she did a lot of there's a lot of effects in here that are practical.
Mm-hmm.
There were things that they could literally only do 2 or 3 times because, well, they only had 2 or 3 plants, or they only had, there's some scenes in there that are really, quite visually attractive. That but again, it's practical effects, so they could literally, it was like, if this doesn't work, what do we do?
Right. Touch it up.
Which I kind of love that sort of filmmaking, where it's like, what, we've got an okay budget, we've got a budget that we can to work with, but everything kind of has to go to plan, otherwise what are we going to do? It's
exactly,
and I like that. The element of they have to kind of make everything work. I'm into that.
So the film, So the story, amongst everything else, is Lenny trying to recover from the loss of her sister and dealing with her boyfriend, her sister's boyfriend, and the hot new super musical stud at her school, who she likes and who likes her.
But she can't accept that he likes her,
right?
Because she has never been the pretty one.
She's always been the other.
So she can't imagine now being the person that's chosen. So
right, she's the main character, and she has issues with that.
Yeah.
or she has trouble. She was always like the understudy to her sister, I guess.
And she's got to kind of figure out how. Again, it's how do I define myself in a world without the one thing that always defined me.
Yep.
And it's something that I think a lot of artists go through. I think it's something a lot of teenagers go through and people go through. So I like that.
Yeah. Well, then we get into how she handles those relationships and whether
terribly.
She
handles them terribly.
I'm just like, and it just, I was watching it and it's like, well, I get the emotional attachment that is the most problematic thing in this film. But then it's like, no, so we feel guilty. That's fine. But then, this, and then it just turns it up a notch. Oh, and then it just keeps getting worse.
Yeah, but okay, but this is a 17-year-old girl who just lost her sister and is confused as hell. So coming from her point of view, a little bit of the chaos, is to be, I think, expected to a certain degree. Now, Toby's kind of walking in some pretty dangerous, crazy space here.
Yes.
And there's no way to get around that. In fact, I told the actor, I said, how does it feel to be the one that everyone's rooting against? And he was kind of like, I guess you could say that. I guess I'm okay with that. And he was like, no, really, none of us, no one in the theater wants the two of you to end up together. You do realize this, right?
Right.
But
it's because it's just wrong, dude.
Yeah, well, but that's not to say that things like that don't happen.
No, I could cite a real world instance.
There you go. So,
but I won't.
Yeah,
because that's not the kind of podcast this is.
Okay.
I just won't. So, but I could. But no, it's
so yes.
It the fact that you throw that she's a teenager, he's barely not a teenager, maybe.
Correct. Yeah.
But like I said, and everything just kind of keeps stacking, and it just like, well, at what point do you decide? Okay, now it's enough. I was just like,
when I can tell you as a character when it happens is when the person they decide that it's too much when it gets in the way of what she really wants and what is feasible and what is actually good for her. I think that there's again some pressure that she's going through. Where do I fit into this world? There's probably a part of her that feels like she should be filling the space that her sister filled to a certain extent,
right?
That she should step up and so this is more complicated than I think a lot of young adult movies get.
Yes.
And is it but I kind of think that's part of what I like about it is that it is messy.
It is all kinds of messy, dude.
And there are decisions that could be made that are just could be, sometimes in our lives, we're one or two decisions away from, really just screwing things up. And I guess if there's one aspect of this film that maybe you could really get after is the world of adults in this film. They're a little
undercooked.
Well, yeah, or overcooked maybe. I don't. But
I think you mean overbaked.
Yeah, overbaked. Yeah, there we go. So, that could be
overbaked.
But
they're lacking.
It's a little problematic, but but again, we're seeing this through the eyes of a teenage girl who is going through an immense amount of trauma, and so it and to be clear here, and this is I think this is interesting, and I think this is true. It's not her sister's death that disturbs her as much as it is her absence. It's just that, and I think that's probably the way that it is with most of us. It's not, but it's not like her sister's death is so traumatic that she can't recover from that aspect. It's an unusual death, to be sure, but it's
right.
because of course it is. Nothing could be, it's an unusual film. Everyone in this film is unusual.
Yes.
And
I don't want people out there to think that I don't like the film or that I think it is bad. I think it is a challenging watch.
Sure.
With all of this physical and emotional messiness that is going on. And you lump that in that it's a young girl that is going through all this, and it just makes it messier. So there are parts of it where I wanted to scream at the screen and reach through and just slap people.
Part of that is because you're a parent.
That is also true.
And you see these moments where it's like, oh, someone should probably be counseling you.
If there was an actual parental figure
correct
in this film, perhaps that would have happened. But there is not really, because Graham is not, and Uncle Big is not. They're adults, but they are not parental figures.
Correct.
And yes, in this film, that's a huge difference. So yeah, I just wanted to reach through a couple times, but like, yeah, I can understand why things were happening the way they were happening, but parts of me are just like, humans are weird, man. Some of the garbage we will do is just amazing. That we know is wrong, either physically or emotionally. It's just wrong, and we'll be like, we'll do that anyway.
Well, and as teenagers, we're twice as likely.
And as teenagers, we're twice. I think it's exponential, so it's like 8 times as likely.
Man, it might be.
But yeah, because teenagers are the most wackadoodle of all the wackadoodle humans.
Well, and I, one of the things I told him, I said, look, I kind of like the fact that this is this magical reality sort of thing, because when I look at my own teenage years, or even earlier or slightly after that sort of thing,
right,
I don't get it. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I did that just seems like crazy, or that just seems like utterly, like I could beat myself up over, sort of thing. And yet, if I look at it through kind of the lens of how I saw it at the moment, it makes more sense.
It seemed like a good idea at the time.
Yes, and you can say, based on my life experience, which was not nearly as much as I thought it was, because I always thought I was smarter than I was.
Teenager syndrome.
Yeah, well, it's just
that just doesn't apply to like relationships and wacky behavior. I mean, I went back to a long time ago. I went back to Houston for my 20th high school reunion, and I drove around. I was by myself, and I called back and I talked to my wife. I said, "Don't ever let me romanticize my time in Texas again." You know what I mean?
Yeah,
just
sure.
the air. Don't ever let me do that again. Because it wasn't as bad as that statement sounds, but it's like, oh yeah, that's right. That is totally not the way I remember anything.
Yeah.
So settings are bad enough. Once you start bringing people and emotions, the hindsight is definitely 2020. If you're lucky, but hopefully you can do something with that for the future. But what you see then is not what is, or what you're going to see later.
And so what I wanted from this film, I think ultimately, was first of all, it's get to know who this character is. We do that quite well.
We do, actually.
A lot of it's visual, some of it's told, but a lot of it's just again, getting inside her head and seeing how she sees the world. And she's a weird kid, and I tend to like the weird kids. Like this is somebody who I probably would have been a friend with,
Right.
or would have wanted to have been a friend with, or at least been like, oh, she seems cool or whatever. She's way out there.
Right.
But actually, the more I think about it, I had friends who were maybe bits and pieces of her. So I like that. I like that it's kind of this unusual way that it's told. I think it's visually compelling. I think it's I don't know if it's a great movie, but it's a really good movie. And that's the movies are hard to make. Movies that are experimental or more experimental. I don't know if I would call this experimental, but there's definitely aspects of it that you be like, well, that's not typically how that's done. And so I think there's a lot of exciting stuff on that. Really, I would have liked to sat with the director for. I had only a few minutes to talk with her, but we talked about like there was a scene where they're lying in a field and the roses sort of come to life, sort of thing. And and watching that scene, I was like, okay, so you don't have a budget for special effects. What are you going to do with this? And then as the scene developed, I went, oh, okay. And now where are you going to go with it? Oh, you're going to go there. Well, that's actually really interesting what you've done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's how I feel about a lot of the film, in that you kind of know where things are going, but the journey getting there is pretty unusual, and it doesn't necessarily do exactly what you expect it to, in ways that we've seen it done before. And so for me, it's kind of exciting.
It is. It's an interesting watch. It's nice when you get a film like that, just to kind of shake you out of, big budget sci-fi blockbuster or whatever, superhero movie thing. It makes you step back and remember what you're doing when you're going in and watching these films. The things that you can be presented with, whether they work or not in any given instance, is irrelevant. You're like, oh, that's right, that you can do these kind of things in movies.
Yeah.
And it is nice to be reminded of that every once in a while. This is a good example of a lot of those. So like I said, I don't want people to think I don't like it. There's a lot of stuff going on.
There are some things that just get casually mentioned that you go, well, we're moving on.
Yeah.
Okay, we're moving on.
And we're just gonna I'm gonna just set this down and then leave it. It's like what? Like a pizza.
But I'm also going to tell you straight up that there are things as a teenager that seemed really important to me that really weren't important at all, and other aspects that probably I should have thought were important that I didn't. So I mean, there's a lot of the stranger decisions that are made in this film are only strange if you aren't thinking of them as if you're thinking of them as an adult. Oh my goodness,
Right.
But as this kind of lovesick teenager who wants comfort, and some of it you go, okay, well, maybe I would have overlooked that just for the, they're not rose tinted glasses, but there's whatever the teenagers see through,
right?
Whatever that is. I thought it was an unusual, interesting, somewhat experimental, but pretty accessible coming of age story for people who don't necessarily like traditional coming of age stories.
Yes, because it's not traditional. So that, again, that is, the sky is everywhere.
And it is, yes.
And it is, yes, it is. Again, it's Apple TV Plus and some theaters somewhere. If you can find one. So so that's I'm done talking about movies now. That hurt my head. Murder, Death on the Nile, to this quasi experimental teen angsty coming of age
You should
weird
be,
rom-com kind of
you
thing.
should be thankful we're not going to move on to the other big movie that's opening this week.
Which one is the other one? That would
It's
be.
It's Marry Me.
Oh yes.
With Jennifer Lopez
and we are going to move on to it, but not
Owen
right
Wilson.
Now.
Yeah,
Not
you
right
just anyway.
because I still have to watch it. So I just got the link today. I have to watch it. But we will talk about that one. We will talk about another dueling rom-coms this week.
Yes. Well, it's Valentine's Day.
It's Valentine's Day, so we have "Marry Me" with J-Lo and Owen Wilson, and we have Jenny Smart and Charlie Day in "I Want You Back," which we're screening tomorrow, actually. So we will have dueling rom-coms. We'll have to do a 2 for rom-com review later this week and put that out for that. So, which we will do. No, it's done, approved. That's what we're gonna do. So that is it. That is it for this week. That is Death on the Nile, and The Sky Is Everywhere, which it is. Which it is. So, till we get back with the dueling rom-coms for Valentine's Day, stay safe. Take it easy, everyone. Have fun doing whatever you're doing. Try to be nice to people. Catch a movie in a theater. And until we talk to you again, I'm Mark. That is Ryan. Bye, Ryan.
See you guys.
And we will talk to you all later.